everyone, we're going into chapter 3 here, Respect in a Diverse Society. I don't anticipate this lecture being too long, but I know I've said that before and they've lasted longer than expected, so we'll just kind of see where this takes us today. If it works, here we go. Objectives: define cultural and personal bias. What are 3 sources of personal bias? And define prejudice and how it relates to discrimination. We're going to kind of hit some other points on there too. So cultural bias has a tendency to interpret a word or action according to a culturally derived meaning assigned to it. Really, an example of this, if you think about what a culture is and interpreting a word or action towards that. Different cultures might see things in different ways. So some people, we smile, that's shown as a good thing. In some cultures, it may not. In some cultures, slurping your food might be normal and a sign to the cook that you're enjoying it, where in other cultures, it's seen as bad manners. So we have to understand in different cultures, there are different biases. Management of chronic illness and disability, beliefs about seriousness and causes of illness, and death-related issues vary among each culture as well. And we'll touch base on that a little bit later on in the chapter. There are personal biases, which is tendency to interpret a word or action in terms of personal significance assigned to it. This can, usually it's a kind of a personal experience. This can be positive or negative. If you find that you're treating a patient and they really enjoy cars and so do you, then you might find that as a personal bias, that's a positive personal bias that you kind of relate to. Or it can be on a negative aspect too. It's important to notice your biases to make sure that you aren't treating different patients differently depending on any biases that you have. There are negative personal biases, which is discrimination and prejudice. So if we think of prejudice, that is defined as an aversion or hostile attitude toward a person who belongs to a group simply because he belongs to that group and is therefore assumed to have objectionable qualities ascribed to that group. Your primary cultural characteristics you're going to find are race and ethnicity, gender, age, and nationality. And we're going to sort of touch base on all of these. There are secondary characteristics as well. That can be place of residence, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, occupation, and religion are just to name a few. Your primary ones you're going to typically see right off the bat. You're going to see their race or their gender or their age. These secondary ones, the place of residence or occupation or religion, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, those you're not going to really see up front. Those are ones you're going to have to ask about because you're not going to be able to really tell. But again, we're going to go into these primary ones here in this chapter. So respecting differences, it is because we are different that each of us is special. I feel like that's something that we've probably learned in grade school, that if we were all the same, it would not be very interesting if we all liked the same things and we all did the same things and we all hated the same things. It's because we are different that makes all of us who we are. If you have ever gone to census.gov, you'll find that it's not really that easy, but it is a very interesting site. If you are more aware of your cultural and racial backgrounds in your community, you will be better treating your community or the area of where you're working in. What is culture? Beliefs, customs, technology, achievements, language, and history of a group of similar people. And again, why is it important as a healthcare provider? Why is it important for you to understand culture? Well, it might change the way you treat. Different cultures have different beliefs in how they heal or how they look at a diagnosis or illness, and it's important for you to know that. Race. So race is the most controversial one that we're going to talk about. Why do you think that is? Think about it in your head for a second. Well, let's talk about it. Race is a social cultural construct based on perceived differences in biology, physical appearance, and behavior. And this is, again, the most controversial because a lot of patients feel more comfortable receiving treatment from someone of their own race. Is that always possible? No. And that can be challenging. And that, again, right, what it says below, race is a major barrier in healthcare. That can make a big difference in how we treat people or not treat people. A lot of people think back to unequal treatments when it was white or colored restrooms, or you had a white hospital and a colored hospital, and you had to go far away if you were colored to get the treatment that you needed, and not always that treatment was fair treatment either. There are feelings from this, from prejudice from long ago, that kind of resurface and come forward. Your ethnic background can influence dietary habits or activities. I know that I had a few Nepali patients who basically said to me, I'll heal when it heals. It's out of my hands. It will get better when it gets better. And that was hard to treat because I couldn't give them I gave them a home exercise program. It's not necessary that they did it because that wasn't their belief. They believed that it would just get better when it was ready to get better. And that's not always the way we think in reference to healing. The first step in breaking these barriers is knowing that there is one there and understanding that we have to approach it in the right manner and respectfully for each person. Gender. So a patient might refuse work with a healthcare worker if they are the opposite gender. This has happened to me quite a few times, and this isn't just because of a personal belief. It was a cultural or religious belief. It's happened to me many times in my career, more than I would like to admit. But I had one patient who, my PT was male and I was female, and a patient came in who she was not allowed by her religion to be touched by a male. So my PT had to subjectively run through everything that he could, and then objectively all of the measurements were done by me because he couldn't physically touch her. And the patient's husband stood behind her the entire treatment, which also made it a little awkward. Mostly because I think he was uncomfortable and he didn't want us to break his religious beliefs, and so we couldn't. And that's what you have to do. Some genders work better with others. If you have a male who may not be trustworthy of a female, that's not your job to make them think otherwise. You just have to try your best to work around it or find the best solution, because ultimately your goal is to treat your patient and get your patient well again. There are some language barriers that you're going to run into. A lot of clinics have interpretation services. I know at my old work, we had a sheet of at least 20 phone numbers, each number for different languages. And if it was Spanish or Italian or German, then you would call that number and they would help you translate the whole treatment. That can get difficult. It's long. It makes the treatment longer than it should be. But each clinic has their own kind of services. So you just have to make sure you understand them whenever you go to work there. Some other ways to communicate with the patient: you have your websites, apps on the phone to interpret, pictures, family members. If you are using a family member, you need to make sure that they're on HIPAA because you're going to say things to that member that could break HIPAA. So you need to make sure that they're on there to be able to translate. And also using layman's terms. So saying it as easily as possible in the plainest language you can so that they're able to understand it. Cultural diversity in healthcare. We're talking ours as in like the American healthcare standard as to others who, it could be a list of other cultures, that believe otherwise. But typically the way we think about it is we want to make it better. We want to control what's happening to us and we want to fix something. We want to do something about it immediately. And typically, we want to intervene right away. We want to get it going. Our strong measures, we give them everything we got up front right away. We plan ahead, and we try to standardize everyone and treat everyone the same way. Where in other cultures, they accept it. They go, okay, well, I'm ill. This is what's going to happen. This is just what was meant to happen. You have balance. You wait and see what's going to happen. Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? You kind of deliberate on all your options and take a gentle approach instead of just rushing in and intervening and doing something immediately. They take it a little bit more cautiously and wait and see what happens. And then each one is more individualized instead of so standard here in America. Age is another characteristic that we're going to talk about. This is the length of somebody's or something's existence. That length of time that somebody or something has existed, usually expressed in years. We don't typically say it in minutes. No one says, how old are you? Well, I'm 12,410 days old. No one says that. We say, I'm 30 years old. I'm 12 years old. I'm 20 years old. And we also have stages of life. So a stage or phase in the lifetime of somebody's or something. So you're infant, you're a teenager, you're midlife. And that's sort of how that's described. Or you're older, geriatrics. That's that stage of life that you're in. Legal adulthood for the state of PA, it's what? In the state of PA, the age where you are legally an adult is 18. There is ageism, which is designate the discriminatory treatment of old people. Sometimes physical and psychological problems may not be addressed because they're, quote, old. And that's what happens. But that's not always the case. That's part of our job, is to determine, is this an actual age-related change, or is this something that's physically a problem and we need to address it immediately? So ethnicity is a person's sense of belonging to a group of people sharing a common origin, history, and set of social beliefs. It may also refer to the individual's place of geographical or national origin. So for me, my ethnicity is Italian, Irish, and Polish. That's just where I'm from. When you're a healthcare provider, you're going to see it all. You have to be careful that you're not grouping members of a certain ethnicity or an ethnic group together. That's discriminatory to homogeneous. You don't want to do that. I don't want to place all of the Spanish-speaking patients in one corner, or everyone who's Catholic over here, or everyone who's Asian over by the traction table. We just treating everyone the same. There is something that I like to jump into, which is called ethnocentrism, which is the belief that one's own cultural ways are superior. That's basically saying, I'm Catholic and that's better than Buddhism. Or I'm Republican and that's better than Democrat, which you will see all of the time in the clinic. But there is also a healthcare worker. We are guilty of behaving in this way as well, and that's called medical ethnocentrism. Believing that your way is the best way, and you going to display that. That's saying that physical therapists and physical therapy assistants are better than chiropractors, or we're better than OTAs. Not one person in this clinical healthcare field is better than another person. We all just do our things differently. We have different ways of treating. OTAs do something different than chiropractors, do something different than PTAs. There's no way that you can compare us all because we do different things. So watch out for that. You'll see it throughout your field, throughout your career, and just making sure that you're treating everyone the same way. There is a socioeconomic status. And that's relating to or involving economic and social factors. You must earn the patient's trust, and a lot of times they feel hindered, secondary to your degree itself, mostly because you're smarter than them or you've gone to school longer, but that's not necessarily that you're better than them. But some patients might feel that kind of hindrance and treat it as a barrier almost. So making sure that you're gearing away from that medical jargon and you're going to that layman's terms, and that will make your patient feel more comfortable. Your occupation and place of residence can make a difference as well. One of the first questions you're going to ask your patient is, where do you live? What do you do? Well, I'm a PTA, or I work in the healthcare field. I work as a call center representative. These are the questions that define your patient and will help you with treatment because you're going to find out these answers. Keep in mind that some patients may not always have a home. I had one patient who lived in her truck, and that's just how she was, and that was a difficult topic. There are farmers, inner city, urban, and suburban areas where more of an urban city town might be more apt to come more often, where if you're talking about a rural patient, they're going to have to travel more, and they might want to be more independent in their care. So just understanding that when your patients come in. Religion. It's like one of those things we don't talk about, right? We don't talk about politics, we don't talk about religion. But religion can really give a meaning to the illness, pain, and suffering. And again, depending on who we're treating, we have to be aware of that. Your religious beliefs may challenge a healthcare profession or medical treatment. I had a patient who, and I think I talked to you guys about this before, who was went on a fasting. I believe it was from June till July. So he didn't eat whenever the sun was up. And he was an outdoor worker. He didn't eat or drink. So that month, he actually declined in improving because he wasn't getting the nutrition that he needed. And I had to respect that with him. And those beliefs concerning the existence, nature of worship will change how your patient approaches the therapy that you're giving them. Some might not have any belief in any religion and think more scientifically, and that's okay. We just have to recognize that and appreciate that in all of our patients. Sexual orientation or nature of sexual preference, which is the direction of somebody's sexual desire toward people of the opposite sex, people of the same sex, or people of both sex. So you're going to hear gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender. They are often treated differently because of that sexual orientation. There was a study done with students who focused their discomfort with patients from different cultural groups, and the most consistently negative attitudes were towards lesbian, gay, and bisexual. Not Catholic, not any type of religion. It was their negative attitudes were towards lesbian, gay, and bisexual patients, which is upsetting because in our world, we have to treat everyone the same way. But a lot of healthcare systems are based on this heterosexual assumptions. And there's almost like a homophobia that's happening that's making them more nervous. It's based on this straight assumption. Everyone should be straight. And it's just an interesting topic. But we have to understand with our patients, again, that each one is an individual and we need to treat them as such. So cultural humility is a process that requires humility, means a constant ongoing self-reflection and self-intricate of one's own unintentional and intentional racism. We need to make sure that we're appreciating each culture and what each culture brings to the forefront, and that we know we're approaching everyone the same way. Cultural sensitivity is a necessary foundation for being culturally competent, and cultural competence is an ongoing process in which the healthcare professional continually strives to achieve the ability and the availability to work effectively within the cultural context of the patient, which is the individual, family, and community. We need to recognize that in each patient. And when treating a patient, taking into account all of those cultural differences and treating each person with respect. All right, guys, that is it for today. Like I said, not surprisingly, I talked longer than I expected to. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I am happy to help. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.